Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth meeting of the Interim Joint Budget Review Subcommittee on Justice and Judiciary for the 2023 interim. Any meeting materials received were posted online earlier this week and made available for downloading. At this time, we'll have the secretary call the roll.
Senator Nemes, Senator Schickel, Senator Webb, Representative Brown, Representative Decker,
Present.
Representative Kulkarni, Representative Sharp, present. Senator Mays-Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Representative Petrie, Representative Reed, Representative Elliott, Co-Chair Funky Fromeyer,
Present.
Chair Flannery.
Here. All right. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the September 20th, 2023 meeting. It does not appear that we have a quorum. I think we're too short. So we will pass that until we have a quorum. We have other meetings going on, and we'll likely have some people show up in the next few minutes. All right. Any members have any guests they'd like to introduce at this time? If not, first on the agenda is the Department of Juvenile Justice update on juvenile detention centers. You all could come to the table, please. All right, if you all could introduce yourselves for the record, please.
I'm Rodney Moore, the HR Director for the Justice Cabinet.
Good morning. My name is Amy Hess. I'm currently serving as the Executive Advisor in the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet.
All right, thank you all for being here this morning. Please proceed with your testimony and presentation.
Thank you for having us. Good morning. We've been asked to speak on the a staffing update for the detention centers and an update on House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 162. So I'm going to go over the latest on staffing. The Justice and Public Safety Cabinet and the Department of Juvenile Justice has spoken before the legislature several times about the staffing crisis that DJJ has been facing, particularly on the detention side. Issues with recruitment and retention are felt throughout the system. With all the efforts to date, we've seen our correctional officer numbers in our 8 detention centers increase from 146 in January to 214 as of this morning. Senate Bill 162 provided additional funding to add another 146 detention staff. Just as important, most of our hiring registers have numerous candidates on them. With these registers, the facilities are able to ensure they're hiring the best and most qualified candidates. Although we've seen a significant staffing improvements, we still have areas that have a long way to go. In our more urban areas where competition is greater, recruitment and retention is still an issue. For instance, in Campbell County, we've seen a growth in correctional officers from 2 in January to 21 as of this morning. In Jefferson County, we've seen the growth in correctional officers from 8 in January to 13 as of this morning. However, these registers have much fewer qualified candidates applying for these positions. The administration and the cabinet have committed every resource to improving recruitment and retention at DJJ. With the help of the governor and with this legislative body, we've been able to increase starting pay for correctional officers from just $30,000 in late 2019 to $50,000 as of today. The legislature also appropriated $3.2 million to sustain DJJ salary increases in a non-budget 2023 legislative session. I'd also like to recognize that the legislature provided $30 million to fund the administration's request to raise the starting salary for the DOC correctional officers, and we're already starting to see positive impacts from that increase. In addition, the General Assembly provided $4.8 million to increase the salaries for DJJ staff that are not correctional officers. So we raised medical staff, food service, and other hard-to-fill positions. We're now offering entry-level salaries 5% below the midpoint of the grade, plus a $5.23 an hour locality premium for correctional officers, which brings them to $50,000. We actively recruit for all positions in DJJ with an emphasis on detention centers. The Cabinet has a dedicated recruitment branch with 3 employees, which was established during the 2020 legislative session. And we also depend heavily on our superintendents and their staff to help with recruitment efforts, because as you can imagine, with 3 people recruiting for DOC, one of the largest departments in state government, it's just not enough. So we really depend on those staff, and no one knows those communities better than those staff, so they really are an asset to us. Just to highlight a few of the efforts that we've done, we contracted with a company called Red 7E, which is a Louisville-based advertising and marketing communication agency that does social media sponsored advertising, Google search engines, marketing, and website advertising. We've held on-site job fairs at most of our detention centers. We attend numerous job fairs throughout the state. We've increased the department's social media presence, and we post positions on Indeed, LinkedIn, the Kentucky Career Center, and Glassdoor. We are still seeing positive signs from the investments made over the past few years, and there is no doubt that raising the pay and improving the safety and operations at DJJ facilities has impacted recruitment and retention efforts. Unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Amy to discuss some of the specifics on the House and Senate bills.
All right, I'll go ahead and let her present, and then we'll take questions and comments after her presentation.
Thank you. I am here to provide an update on the legislation that was originally proposed as Senate Bill 162 and House Bill 3 that was subsequently enacted, and the provisions therein as they impact DJJ. Within Senate Bill 162, we broke that down into, of course, 11 sections, and then also the 4 sections within House Bill 3. So if it's amenable to this body, I will just proceed to brief through each of those sections. The first section pertains of Senate Bill 162 pertains to organization, specifically directing that we move the Division of Professional Development under the Office of Support Services, create an Office of Detention, where detention centers would report to one supervisor who reports directly to the commissioner, move the Division of Transportation under the Office of Detention, and then also create a Division of Compliance. All of those things have been completed, and if you have any questions about those things, we're happy to answer. The second section pertains to data. Specifically, the provision in the legislation directs that the Cabinet shall maintain a comprehensive centralized data tracking system for the Department of Juvenile Justice. In the scope of that provision, we contracted with a vendor known as Marquee, who develops software throughout the country for correctional facilities. And specifically, these electronic offender management systems are in place in correctional facilities throughout the country, including here in Kentucky with the Kentucky Offender Management System, also known as COMS. Because that procurement was actually unfunded and off budget cycle, then DJJ and the Cabinet worked together to use available grant funds and the DJJ General Fund. We ended up getting a grant entitled the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program to procure Phase 1 of what we refer to as JCOMS, the Juvenile Kentucky Offender Management System, the JCOMS project. The initial spend was about $750,000 in federal grant funds and about $200,000 in the DJJ General Fund. That Phase 1 procurement specifically pertains to just developing or establishing a baseline and the infrastructure level modules based on DJJ's needs and the build-out. Phases 2 through 4 will be the actual implementation and conversion of the 12 known systems within DJJ that are currently in operation and converting those into the JCOM system. That, so far, we are funding through the 2023 National Criminal History Improvement Program supplemental funding in the amount of $1.477 million. That phase 2 specifically will include a lot of the essential functions, such as just the regular institution functions, the grievance tracking, jobs and programs, property inventory, visitation tracking, substance abuse programs, and others. And then phase 3 will be the health programs, and phase 4 are analytical and management tools. We're meeting regularly with Marquis. We have a working group set up between the Office of the Secretary, DJJ, and the Marquis vendor, so that we can discuss the updates as they progress through the implementation. Unless you have any questions about the data. Section 3 pertains to the Juvenile Justice Oversight Council. There are multiple provisions that fall under that, and since the JJOC has the lead on those things, we are, of course, in a response mode as to whatever it is they request. Several members of the Cabinet and DJJ have presented in front of that body on multiple occasions throughout this past year. Section 4 pertains to the mental health treatment. Specifically, it states that the Department of Juvenile Justice shall enter into sufficient contracts to ensure the availability of institutional treatment for children with severe emotional disturbance or mental illness as soon as practicable. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services has the lead on that particular element, and we remain committed to working with them to try to find those contracts and establish those contracts. Section 5 pertains to detention centers and the youth development centers specifically. Starting with the first element of this particular section, it is to provide children residing at a detention facility with access to a mental health professional. Sign-up sheets have been instituted in all of the facilities so that the youth can request access to the regional psychologists that are currently uncontracted in place. In the second element of this section, it pertains to monthly documented training related to emergency response. A number of modules have been developed by the DJJ training staff. The first module was sent out to all staff on June 23rd, and since then there have been 3 additional modules dealing with disturbances or hostage situations, suicide prevention, and infectious diseases. These come out on a monthly basis. There is a test for accountability and documentation purposes, and thus far we've had about a 96 to 97% compliance rate for all of the individuals to whom that applies. The third element talks about working with staff and making sure that they have access to and are properly trained in the use of defensive equipment comparable to that utilized by the Department of Corrections. This includes tasers, pepper spray, and shields. First, I'll update you on the pepper spray, or the OC spray as we call it. That defensive equipment is now in place in all of the detention centers and the youth development centers. Those facilities have all been trained and authorized to use that spray. We started by coordinating with the Department of Corrections back in February and began the training so that all the detention centers were trained first. We implemented the training in the Basic Academy in May, and we developed consolidated standard operating procedures for both the detention centers and for the YDCs. We reviewed that with all the staff in those locations, the facility managers, and then anyone who is certified and authorized to use OC spray must be exposed to the OC spray itself so that they understand what that actually feels like. The tasers, we have also procured all the equipment and been coordinating with the Department of Corrections in order to implement that training as well. Training is now scheduled for tasers to be authorized and utilized in the detention centers and the YDCs by supervisors only. That training will begin at the end of this month. And then finally, the shields are in place at all of the detention centers. The next element pertains to the specially trained emergency response teams. These are what we refer to as the critical incident response teams, or CIRT teams, modeling after the Department of Corrections. At this point, the cell entry equipment has been distributed. Personnel who are assigned to these teams are receiving a $100 a month stipend, and each detention center has selected a commander and a co-commander, as well as their teams, with the exception of Fayette and Campbell. However, they are in the process of identifying who these team members will be. Those individuals selected have already been participating in training that is hosted by the Department of Corrections. They've participated in cell entry training in August and basic CIRT training with the Department of Corrections in September. And criteria for those teams and policy are being worked through at the moment. The next provision under this section talks about the Memorandum of Understanding with local law enforcement for emergency response, and including those agencies in emergency response trainings. At this point, all detention centers and the YDCs have established those MOAs, and they've discussed those MOAs with local law enforcement agencies. Currently, DJJ is coordinating to determine how to best incorporate those law enforcement agencies into regular training sessions, as well as the fire departments in those jurisdictions as well. And then the final provision, two provisions in this section. One is to be equipped with an alarm that directly communicates an emergency situation to a local dispatch center. For one thing, all of the radios that are utilized in our centers have what they call a man-down feature, to just push the button and to be able to notify control. The control rooms have Avaya phones, which have now been equipped with a one-touch button feature, which immediately dials 911. And we are also installing hard lines within these facilities, so that there will also be an additional feature where you can push the button and be connected directly to 911. And the last part of that section deals with the administrative regulations in order to implement these sections, and those emergency regs were filed in May. Section 6 pertains to developing and implementing a plan to transition back to the regional model of juvenile detention centers while safely segregating males and females and separating violent and nonviolent offenders. We have conducted a number of analyses in that regard in order to determine the best path forward and how to implement this in our facilities, and we are working through those assessments now, including with the design firms that have been contracted. The analysis thus far clearly identifies challenges in our current structure within these facilities in order to safely segregate those groupings of individuals. Currently, we're looking at trying to separate the high offending males, which is essentially Class C felonies and above, the lower offending males, so the Class Ds and below, and misdemeanors, and then same thing on the females side. Unfortunately, many of our facilities only have a limited amount of space, and the groupings of the cells or the rooms would not allow for any type of adjustment if you were to exceed the capacity within one of those, what we refer to as pods or groupings of cells. So currently, the design teams are looking to see if there's any way to be able to make that happen within each of these facilities. The Other provisions within this section refer to the wearing of uniforms. All uniforms have been obtained, acquired, and have been distributed, and all corrections officers are now wearing those uniforms. Also, the Youth Worker R program and the ability to rehire individuals from DJJ who have resigned and returned to their prior employment, those two provisions have also been enacted and also have been implemented. The reinstatement of a management training program within DJJ, that is has also made substantial progress since the enactment of this legislation. DJJ has been working with the National Institute of Corrections, or NIC, which has a nationally renowned reputation for working with correctional facilities, both adult and juvenile, and they have established their own management training programs. We're now looking to work with them and specifically first on a mid-level management, which is referred to as the Management Development for the Future program. So anyone who has been in their position for at least 6 months would be eligible to apply for this 18-month program that is sponsored by NIC. And then in addition to that, working with them for technical assistance to develop a leadership development program for all managers within DJJ and all aspiring managers within DJJ. So far, the application process is open, and it was just extended for that MDF, that mid-level manager program, through the next week. The last part of that section refers to the transfer of juveniles if they are a security risk or if they have to essentially be transferred to another facility in order to avoid interference with a criminal investigation or for other reasons. The transfer forms have been approved, and the Division of Transportation, which now falls under detention, has implemented that. The next two sections actually deal with other departments, but just in brief, the seventh section refers to the Medicaid waiver. CHFS has the lead on that and is working to get that waiver for actually on a larger scale for treatment. And then for audits, which is the eighth section, the Office of the Auditor of Public Accounts is to perform a full performance review of the pre-adjudication facilities operated by and the pre-adjudication programs administered by the Department of Juvenile Justice. And so we are in response to whatever requests they may have. The ninth section refers to funding within Senate Bill 162. And those provisions specifically start with the salary increases to the youth workers, also the other job classifications within the department, the general fund monies for the 146 additional youth workers in juvenile detention centers, and also the development of the youth offender management system, which I referred to earlier. In addition, there is a provision for money to provide security upgrades within the DJJ detention centers. And specifically, we are currently working to implement a number of security improvements. First off, with the x-ray machines, those have been ordered and will be delivered to all of the detention centers by the end of the year. We currently have an RFP out for tray slots to be installed in each of the unit doors and each of the cell doors, as well as securing interior walls. Hollow walls presented a security issue, and those are being developed as well. The water management system, so that you can shut off the water to individual cells or rooms, that is in progress, and then also looking at fencing and other projects. The next several provisions refer to the working with the State Interagency Council for Services and Supports to Children and Transition Age Youth. The Commissioner has met with SIAC several times to discuss how that will work and to develop the criteria for the contract agency. And then also the enabling the design experts to come in and look at how we return back to that regional model of detention. That is in the assessment and design phases, and the initial data on all of the current facilities is being collected, including a full assessment of all the building use and structures and the mechanical items to help inform that process. In conjunction with that, we're looking at the population data throughout DJJ and what it would mean to return to the catchment area, we call it, or regional model of detention. And the next provision, last two provisions within Senate Bill 162 under this section refer to the transportation costs for the female youth detained by the Department of Justice and allocating money for that until we return to a regional model. That reimbursement process is being coordinated with the Finance Cabinet, County Fees Branch, and they are figuring out how to track that, but that is in process as well. And then the last provision refers to the money appropriated to the Auditor of Public Accounts for that audit that I previously mentioned. That is actually all of the provisions within Senate Bill 162. There are only 4 provisions, sections within House Bill 3, and I can briefly go through that.
If we could, for the, I guess, sake of time, I've got some questions, and there may be questions from other members, and you can maybe House Bill 3 will be asked about. I guess first I would say, this has been a very hot topic. It's been discussed quite a bit. A lot of discussion in the interim, even before the session starting last year with the working group. I have a whole list of questions. I don't know if we'll be able to address all of them today, but if it's agreeable to you all, I could just submit these to you all, and it probably would afford you all the opportunity to give the most accurate and best answers. But I have a few questions and comments before I turn the floor over to other members for questions or comments they may have. First, any partnerships with external providers that may help with better programming or reduce the workload of the DJJ?
Yes, as far as outside programming and services, yes, there's we're working with a number of elements. Specifically, this falls under the House Bill 3 portion, but on the behavioral assessments and trying to identify those outside contractors that would be in a position to enter into contracts for behavioral health assessments.
Okay. Over the last year, we've heard stories, had reports, testimony on arson, assaults, escapes, riots, rapes, gang rapes at these facilities. Have there been any changes in leadership, any resignations, any terminations? We have stories of employee assaults, sexual assault on the children and the custody and care of DJJ. We have, I guess, the children on children violence. It's just been an absolute mess. Any changes in personnel, any changes in leadership? What's an update on current criminal investigations? Have any charges been brought? If you all could touch upon that.
I can touch upon the staffing. I'm not sure about the investigations or where they where they stand. We have had leadership changes at Campbell County. We recently hired a new superintendent that has a wealth of experience in youthful offenders. We've also had leadership change at Jefferson County. There's still some ongoing investigations, but yes, sir, as we get investigations, we're taking immediate action or corrective action on the staff members that we substantiated cases on.
And I would add that all of the facilities have been directed that if they are assaulted by a juvenile within our custody, then they are to immediately notify local law enforcement. And also any time that there is an incident involving a juvenile where it requires any type of use of force, those are immediately reported to the internal investigations branch.
Have there been any changes in, I guess, the top brass within DJJ since, I guess, within the last year?
No, sir. Are you?
I guess within kind of the what you would call the C-suite, if you will, the executive.
Yeah, no, sir. There's not been any changes.
I can recall Representative Bratcher asking the question to the commissioner and the cabinet secretary if they were the right people for the job, and they said that was up to the governor, and of course it is. I'm not seeing the changes that I think need to be made, but I'll let other committee members address that. Whole lot of questions, but I will submit them to you all, and hopefully we can get the best answers back possible. I believe we have some committee members that have questions. It looks like on the list here we have Representative Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Moore, you started out saying that the governor had helped out. Can you tell me specifically what he has done?
Concerning salaries, yes, sir. Earlier in the year, the governor raised the salaries for the we reallocated the DJJ youth workers inside of detention centers to correctional officers. And during that reallocation, he increased their salaries to $50,000 a year. And then this body recognized the importance of that and gave us the additional funding moving forward to appoint at those salaries.
Is that something within the governor's scope, or does that have to come out of the legislator?
I'm not sure I'm the person to answer that question, but DJJ was able to do those increases in their current budget.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I believe next on the list, the question is Senator Schickel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple of questions, more comments and questions. Surprise, surprise. But first of all, Amy, a great detailed report. One of the things I worried about when we did Senate Bill 162 is putting so many things in statute. I thought it would be really hard as a former corrections and juvenile detention administrator. It's really hard to manage by statute, so I think your report was very good, very detailed, and I don't envy your position. What is the deadline for going back to the regional model?
So currently, there are design assessments occurring. As I mentioned previously, we are looking at the population data to determine how we might safely segregate these 4 different groups of juveniles in each of the facilities. And unfortunately, several of our facilities just are not currently constructed to be able to do that. And in addition, whereas, for example, a high-level female, high-offending female, we have perhaps an average of only 5 or 6 of those in all of Kentucky on any given day in our detention facilities. And if we were to go to a regional model, then you can imagine that just one female, high-level female, may be in our custody at that location. The problem with that is that she would then occupy a whole grouping of cells because that would be dedicated toward the high-level females. And so the question is, how many cells do we actually need for high-level females if that number were to increase on any given day? And so that's part of the assessment phase. And unfortunately, we don't have a projection right now as to whether or not we can accomplish those things given the current budget and also given the current dynamics and construction of our facilities. But we're working through that with the design firms to be able to come up with the best solutions.
Well, having worked with a lot of design firms on correction problems, they certainly don't have all the answers. They come up with ways for you to spend money, but they certainly don't have all the answers. The reason I'm so interested in this question is because in northern Kentucky, we're one of the 3 largest metropolitan areas of the state, and we currently do not have a corrections facility, or a juvenile correction facility open for northern Kentucky detainees. And that's a huge, huge problem. This bill specifically states that we will use a regional model. But in northern Kentucky, we do not have a regional model, and I cannot get an answer when we will. I think you're correct. There are classification problems. I think when I look at the classification proposals, you're classifying by crime instead of behavior. And if you've ever run a correctional facility, you know that really you need to classify by behavior, not crime, because a low-level detainee can be much more dangerous in custody than a serial murder. And so these are complex problems, but I think you can delay this regional model forever if you're going to try to come up with the perfect solution, because you're going to spend a bunch of money and you're never going to come up with a perfect solution. One thing I would encourage you to do, and I know you don't have any direct say over this, so please excuse me, but maybe if you would run it up the chain of command, is that you need to keep flexibility in your pods, different numbers. It's not necessary to have a separate building for females. I don't know where that all got started. If that was necessary, we'd have 2 jails in every county. But that is not necessary. That's wasting money. But you do need to have flexibility in your pods so that you can, when you have just 1 or 2 females high risk, you have a small pod. Then you can convert that to a male pod and back and forth. So but that being said, we in northern Kentucky need a juvenile detention facility that's open. We've had press conferences, we've had prosecutors, we were promised it. We've always had a detention facility up there until the last year, and now we don't have one. Please, please, please talk to the commissioner, get this open. The other thing is, people talk about all these assaults and things on juveniles. Well, I forget what the reporter's name is, John Cheese or Chives from the Lexington. Somehow everybody's made him the authority on juvenile justice. We don't believe anything else he says, but it seems like when he talks about juvenile justice, Kentucky youth advocates and all we legislators say, oh, whoa, isn't this terrible? Being a correctional officer in one of these facilities is a hard job. And I'm glad to see that you have finally given them some tools to defend themselves. But I'll never forget when we were in here that there was a riot in one of these facilities where the control room was forcibly taken over, and the emphasis of the article and the emphasis of some legislators was one juvenile got a broken arm after the place had been forcibly taken over and employees assaulted. I would like to see more support of employees and less questions. And I guess that goes to the issue of who's running the show, because that is where the problem is. And quite frankly, politics has gotten into it, where if it's, if there's an assault or something, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. But why are we surprised that we can't get employees in these facilities when every time they do something, we question them and threaten them with indictment? It shouldn't be any surprise. So, I apologize for going on a rant, but I just wanted to share those things with you because I think it's very, very important. We have a juvenile crime problem in northern Kentucky with no detention facility. That should be job one. Get us a detention facility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may respond, please.
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. And as far as equipping the staff to be able to respond to violent incidents, we have received very positive feedback from the staff about the implementation of defensive tools such as OC spray, and now with the rollout of tasers, the shields, and then also just additional training as well, as those things are incorporated into the academy. I will just note that the Campbell Juvenile Detention Center is not currently closed. It is, of course, accepting new female juvenile intakes. Also, youth returning for court hearings, and it also still operates the Female Youth Development Center. But you are correct that the majority of the females who were assigned there were reassigned to the Boyd Detention Center several months ago because of a staffing issue. However, that said, and we had 8 individuals actually in residence at the detention center as of yesterday in Campbell County. But that said, the Campbell Juvenile Detention Center will, when it reopens, which should be fully, which should be very soon, will only house male juveniles who are charged with lower offenses. However, that is a majority of the population, and the females will then continue to be housed at Boyd Juvenile Detention Center, is currently the plan.
Mayor, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
that is not a regional model as prescribed in the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe we have 2 more members with questions. Next on the list is Representative Decker.
Thank you all for your report, very detailed, many ways. One thing I didn't hear and wondered if you could tell me, I know that you said it went from 146 to 214 employees, and then maybe some other numbers, but how many unopened or opened positions are still not filled, and how many would be full capacity of employees?
Representative, I pulled those numbers this morning. I left them laying on my desk, but I can definitely get those for you. And we provide a report to other committees, and I'm sure that report will answer your questions as well.
Okay, if you could provide
we'll
it then
get that
to us.
for you.
Thank you.
Senator Funky Fromeyer, question, comment?
Yes, and I am representing Campbell County as my state senate position, and am quite alarmed and in quite support of what I'm hearing from Senator Schickel, because of the recognition that a regional model is so desperately needed in our population in northern Kentucky is nearly 500,000. So we recognize that we're at crisis levels. I'm spending some time with our judges and spending some time in our communities, and we're getting cries for help. So I applaud the great work going from 2 to 21 in Campbell County. That's quite an emphasis. What I'm slightly astounded by is what Representative Flannery acknowledged is if the organizational structure was quite broken a year ago, and within that organizational structure, there hasn't been some significant leadership change, who do we reach out to correct what's quite broken? And I'm really thrilled with the detail that you've shared today, Amy. Just the thorough vetting of each section of Senate Bill 162, which was quite lengthy. And there was tremendous input in preparing that, tens of hours in preparing Senate Bill 162. I sat in on some of that because it is so directly affecting my Senate district. But where do we go from here today at 9:30 a.m.? Where do we go from here to get Campbell County established as the regional model that we've begged for?
First off, yes, ma'am. The leadership change at Campbell County, I'm not sure if this body was aware of, but I'll allow Mr. Moore to address that part first.
I think your question was about maybe more the central office area. And of course, I think the secretary has said it. These are governor appointed positions, so it's not really, I don't think, for me to say about those positions. That'd be a governor decision.
We did have a facility manager change at Campbell County recently, and that person is now on board. And so with that leadership at Campbell, we feel that in the additional recruiting, that the staffing will continue to increase, and will continue to hopefully be in a better position in order to return that particular facility to be able to accommodate more individuals, more juveniles. The answer to your second part of your question, the regional model is, again, as we are in the assessment phase currently, trying to figure out how, and Campbell is actually a prime example of how it is not constructed to be able to safely segregate all four of those groups. So therefore, the design firm is coming up with options for us to examine to determine how we might best go about doing that, or whether we would have to put certain groups of individuals in a whole separate facility in that same region in order to return to that regional model.
Follow up, yes.
And just in follow up to that, is there any coordination then with our local justice systems in offering, if there were one high level person that is problematic, that we could have in a special area within the adult facility so that we're able to house both male and female in the juvenile facility? Is that any flexibility there?
Are you referring to using adult correctional facilities in order to offset the need? We are certainly exploring all options, and I know that the Cabinet has met with the local law enforcement representation in that area and listened to their concerns at this point. However, we have I will have to get back to you on whether or not we are actively looking at the integration of adult corrections and juvenile corrections, because I believe there are going to be some prohibitions, obviously, that we would have to overcome to do that.
All right, I don't believe we have any other questions. I guess I would leave on this. We've got a mess here. There's not any changes in leadership. I suggest we get a bucket, mop, dustpan, and broom, because we need to get this cleaned up. And we've got a lot of changes that need to be made, and appreciate you all coming in today. I'll go ahead and have the next presenters come up from AOC. While they're coming up, I believe we have a quorum now with the arrival of additional members. And do we have a motion to approve the September minutes? Got a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Minutes are approved. Good morning. Okay, if you all could state your names for the record, please, and thank you all for being here today. I know you all were here maybe a month or two ago, and I did ask for you all to be put back on just to get a brief update, and if you all can tell us your names for the record, and please proceed.
My name is Danny Rhodes. I'm the Executive Officer of the Department of Court Facilities at AOC.
My name is Jenny Lafferty. I'm Director of Finance and Administration at the AOC.
So just to give you an update of where we are with our budget request for judicial facilities. As many of you know, we've done a court facility assessment of many of our counties. The KRS 26A 162 does require that the AOC assess the needs for court facilities and for construction and renovation throughout the Commonwealth. And these assessments shall consider age, space adequacy, project projected needs, structural soundness, mechanical, electrical systems, security needs, interior and exterior quality of the existing facilities. So in 2020, the AOC did retain an architecture firm to do assessments of 37 counties that we deemed the greatest needs that hadn't had a project authorized prior to 1996. 35 counties authorized by the General Assembly from 96 to 2000 will be assessed in the 2024 2026 biennium and added to that ranking list that was created from the original 37. All the remaining counties will be assessed in the next biennium. So, as I mentioned, these facility assessments, the methodology was based off of that KRS as far as what is to be assessed in those facilities. From the 37 counties that were assessed, we have developed critical, high, and moderate ranking of those facilities. The critical needs are any building that was assessed a score of 39.9% or less. And as you can see there, that we have 14 of those counties identified for critical need, 2 of which have already been authorized by the General Assembly, Leslie County and Graves County. So based on that assessment ranking, the following counties were included in the capital plan for the 2022 to 2028 bienniums. The Owsley County courthouse was assessed, and that was included in our 2024 to 2026 biennium, as well as the Court of Appeals building. 2026 to 2028 was Spencer and Caldwell counties. 2028 to 2030 was Fulton and Estill County. And of the other greatest needs of the assessments, Lee, Estill, Edmondson, Clark, LaRue, Greenup, and Meade were also identified on there. So just to give you an idea of some of the current conditions of Owsley County, this is the county administration building as well as the KCOJ occupied space for our courts. The KCOJ occupies basically the second floor of that facility with 1 courtroom and 1 jury and conference room that the Judiciary also uses. The clerk's office has multiple issues that they deal with as far as space needs as well as infrastructure needs regarding roof issues, HVAC issues, data and electrical issues that we have tried to address through the years, but in an aging facility that has been very challenging. So with the overall assessment score of 31.97%, that was identified as a critical need, the most critical of those. The current courthouse, as I mentioned, does not meet the current security or accessibility standards of a judicial facility. The plumbing, HVAC, electrical, interior, roof are in extremely poor condition. And space is deficient in the courtrooms, judges' chambers, prisoner handling facilities, statewide services offices, and not configured in a safe, effective, or efficient manner for the court operations. And I will add that in that facility, there is basically 1 restroom for the judiciary as well as the prisoners. So there's multiple times that, that the prisoners are led in there and they have to use the restroom right after a judge has left that facility. So our request for Owsley County, authorization of the judicial branch construction project in Owsley County with a maximum authorized use allowance amount of $2,353,000. Will support a 24,400 square foot facility. The design program for the proposed project reflects a scaled down construction requirement adopted by the judicial branch in 2018. Under those scaled down requirements, the 24,400 square foot facility is the smallest that would meet the needs for the judicial branch for all functions for the programmatic needs of that facility. The total estimated cost for that facility is $28,015,000. Additional use allowances. So a unique aspect of the judicial branch projects are use allowance authorizations. So the General Assembly authorizes the judicial branch projects based on the historical cost information before the project is developed, designed, or actually bid. So the actual costs are unknown for 3 to 4 years while we go through that design and site selection process. So temporary financing is issued for the design costs and land acquisition. And at that point, we wait for the project to be designed and bid out. Bonds are sold after the bids are received, and proceeds are paid for temporary financing balance. So that bond will include any interim financing that we have incurred at that point. When the project cannot proceed due to the estimated cost and it exceeds the maximum use allowance amount, counties incur costs for projects that cannot be completed. So the interim financing cost that has already been established through those bond anticipation notes, the county is incurring interest costs as we wait for those bonds to be sold.
Mr. Rhodes, if I could
Yes.
interrupt here, I know probably have some members that will need to be leaving soon.
Okay.
If we could maybe just hit the highlights, and so we can have time for any questions that members may have, and then we also have I'll need a brief update on video arraignments and
Okay.
technology. So if you could, I know you've got a really in-depth presentation here, and I appreciate that. If you could just maybe speed it up a little bit. So
No
we
problem at
can
all. I'll
finish timely.
I'll touch on where we're at with our use allowances for projects that we are currently projecting to be deficient as far as our use allowances. And those are Crittenden, Clinton, Butler counties. Those projects are basically being put on hold because we are projecting that the actual use allowance will be exceeded with even going to a 25-year bond, which our APs allow us to do. AP Part 10 allows us to do. With a request for additional use allowance for those projects of $1.4 million, we do feel that we can fit all three of those projects within a 20-year bond. The other alternative to that is to language in our budget bill that would allow us to extend, without making an additional request, extend those bond terms to 30 years, and that will allow us to move forward with those three projects.
So we do have two additional types of requests that are general fund requests, and one is for asset preservation pools. With a presence in all 120 counties, we do occupy 5.4 million square feet of space across the state, which is more than any other executive branch state agency. And yet we are allocated only 85 cents per square foot to maintain those facilities, which is far less than any other executive branch agency. And we've had 105 projects that have been authorized by the General Assembly, capital construction projects or renovations, since 1990. So we, as a state, have invested a significant amount of money into our court facilities. And as you all know, they have life cycles for most of their major building components, and most of those are 20 years or less. And so we have many, many buildings that need HVAC repairs and replacements, that need roof replacements, that need electrical component replacements. And so what you're going to see this year is a request from us asking for $53 million for 4 different capital projects for asset preservation, HVAC, roof replacement, electrical systems, and miscellaneous repairs and renovations. We believe we can do 30 projects with the HVAC replacement allocation, 20 roof replacement projects, 25 electrical systems projects. And for miscellaneous repairs and renovations, that is for 2 projects at the Jefferson County Judicial Center, moving the data center, and you're going to have to help me. What's the other one?
It's a renovation of the jury assembly room to make that basically an extra courtroom, as well as accommodate multiple jury assembly orientations.
And then also it's a family court renovation project in Kenton County to get the family court suites the way they need them to be, and masonry repairs in Warren County. And this is just a list of projects on this slide that were authorized before 2000. So those are the projects that are probably now 20 years old. And if you go to the next slide, 53 additional projects have been authorized since 2000. And just to mention really quickly, we've also got a Court of Appeals project. We did have to move the Court of Appeals out of its location. We've leased space for the Court of Appeals for 30 years, but it did have mold in it. The landlord went bankrupt. We were required to put caution tape up on 5 of the Court of Appeals offices. And so we've had to move them out. We activated our temporary leasing measures. They do currently have a temporary fit up in Franklin County, but it is a temporary space. So we are requesting $14.1 million for an approximately 17,000 square foot building, which is 1,000 square foot less than what they've been leasing. No land acquisitions required. It's adjacent to the AOC central headquarters. It's going to be built on our Vandalay Drive property, and it's already in the capital plan for the 24-26 biennium.
You all have a lease for the Court of Appeals at, I guess, on Chamberlain Drive or
We
Avenue.
do.
What's the term on that lease?
It's, I think, 5 years. Of course, it ends at the end of every biennium and automatically renews. So we set it up for the approximate amount of time that it would take in order to build the new project.
And that property was previously used by the Franklin Circuit Court, I believe, when there was a renovation.
It was, however, it had been used by another agency in between. So there were some fit-up costs that we had to do to get it temporarily ready for the Court of Appeals.
I stopped by there the other day. I had some documents that needed to be filed, so I was there. Any questions from committee members? Senator Webb, I know what she probably wants to talk about.
Since I practiced in a lot of these places, Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty familiar with the needs. But Greenup County, you know, we've got a pretty good potential growth prospectus there, and family court is held in the old courthouse, and you know, we're glad to help the county out with that for space and all that. But I mean, what's your all's assessment of the need? I mean, to me, there's a great need in Greenup County. That building is not adequate for the clerk either. It has some issues as well. There could be some safety concerns the way the jail is configured, and I could go on and on. So I was just, you know, I've talked about it for several years now, but certainly every time I go there to work, the people that work in there are talking about it to me. So I'm just curious as to why they're not a little farther up on the list.
Well, I think what I would say is they are in the critical need category. They do have a critical need, and we obviously agree with you there. You know, all of those projects, there are 12 projects that have not yet been authorized that are in that critical need category. And they range from 31.97% to, I think, 38%, which was Meade County. So those are pretty close together. as far as that's concerned, and Greenup is obviously a critical need.
Well, and I think, the committee should hear about that, and from those of us who are familiar and are there every day and communicate with the people that work there, because that's really what this is about. I know, when we built the Carter County courthouse and the Perry County courthouse, we had health concerns with the clerks. I mean, we should have moved them out probably before we did. And you could punch your hand through the wall and see the mold. And I mean, that's not a fit working environment for anyone. And I think we're reaching the critical level there, and perhaps in Elliott County, not just because it's in the chairman's judicial circuit, but I think and Elliott County is a very small county, some like Owsley, but the people that work there and the safety of those folks are paramount to us in this committee, and I just think we need to look at a rational, cost-effective approach, that suits that location and the growth prospectus in the next 20, 30 years. So those are the factors that I've always looked at in building courthouses. And not everybody needs a new courthouse, but there are the people that need them very bad. So I just that's my annual commentary, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I echo those concerns and comments. I think I would add Senator Webb, and I've received, I believe, within the last day or so, some statistics from the AOC on caseload volume, which I believe is a very important part of this conversation. All these courthouses and counties that are on the critical list, they obviously all have needs, and there's good reason why they've been put on that list. But I think it's also very important when we make decisions on where we are going to appropriate tax dollars that we take into consideration the volume, because some of these counties on these lists just quite frankly don't have a very high caseload volume. And then you take a county like Greenup that, has a fairly substantial caseload volume, and there are, other, environmental concerns and structural concerns and issues involving a judicial facility being inside of the county government courthouse, and it's very difficult to have a jury trial in Greenup County the way the setup is in that judicial annex. So I echo your comments and concerns, and I guess, just add that, it does appear that there is going to be some level of consideration by AOC on caseload volume, and I think that's a really important part of this conversation. Any other
If I could
questions?
just add one thing, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I think that's relevant, and that's what I was saying about the size and the expenditures, and what we continue to look at as a committee. But and if you need somebody to vouch for what I just said, we've got a Supreme Court justice that served as a district court and circuit court judge in those facilities, and he's very well aware. And that's sometimes he talks to us about that. But I mean, Justice Conley came up his whole career there, so I would say you might want to speak to him too. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, I appreciate you all coming back to present. I know it was somewhat on short notice, but a very important topic and important to me, so I do appreciate you all coming up. And if we could very briefly have an update on another important topic to me, Zoom court and court technology. And if we can just hit the brief highlights on this, because we are running short on time and I've got somewhere to be in a few minutes. So if you can just try to hit the highlights, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Beth Lucas with the Administrative Office of the Courts. I am the Implementation and Court Services Director, and my colleague.
I'm Scott Mattingly, Chief Technology Officer for AOC.
The video arraignment and video conferencing, this is the project status. We were allocated $10.6 million in 2021. That all has been obligated and or expended. We anticipate completing this project at the end of April of 2024. That will not actually put JAVS 8 systems in every courtroom. We'll actually have about 254 courtrooms that will still require that update. So that is a $3.5 million investment annually, with about 50 systems being implemented per year. Right now, every courtroom is video conferencing capable. So we will just continue to upgrade those units to JAVS 8 units through the end of April. This is just a representation of those numbers.
This is a quick representation of our use of the solution. So our Zoom rooms that I put in, if you'll notice, right really at April is when we started large-scale deployment. Those numbers have increased. This is the number of meetings per room. A lot of those are, a lot of our meetings right now are one meeting for pretty much the whole day. So you can see that. And if you look at the next slide, it shows a very similar trend, but this is meetings, the number of minutes per day. We've hit 40,000 minutes per day now, and we are seeing 35,000 on a weekly basis, per day on a weekly basis. And quick discussion on the jailers solution that was put in, which is separately funded through House Bill 1. Their vendor, Trace3, has been making progress. They have installation of 50 out of the 77 detention centers and are expected to have completion in November.
I think one of the questions this committee had last time was how do we incent Zoom court? And one of the ways is through our judicial support specialist certification program, which was started in 2022 based on a Supreme Court amended order. And currently we have 153 certified JSSs, and what they do is help with Zoom court. So they schedule the events, they welcome participants, they move people from room to room. They go into rooms as needed. They help facilitate in the courtroom. So basically, whatever is needed by the judge, the JSS can help facilitate that. They also help facilitate e-filings and orders and things of that nature. The JSSs go through a 6-hour certification program, and then they have 3 hours of annual certification that they are also required to take. One thing I will say that with each month, they are required to report the number of facilitated court events, as well as we collect information on e-filings that were also processed during that month. This is a visual representation of what that looks like. So as you can see, there's been a pretty steady increase in the number of remote court events. Some judges do still choose to facilitate their own Zoom court, but many, 153 in fact, have JSSs who also facilitate with them. And how we get the word out about the program and what's happening is we have a new newsletter called Behind the Bench. This is distributed to all the JSSs and their judges who also participate in this program. So it's just a way monthly to get the word out about the program and changes to the program, updates to the technology, things of that nature.
And if I can maybe cut you all off here, and I'm sure there's plenty more that you all could talk about just for the sake of time, because I have an appointment at 10:30. We'll see if there's any questions by committee members or comments. All right, Senator Funky Fromeyer.
I really thank you for this great work. When we think about the return on our investment, this is a very good investment and results in expeditious processes that are so important. So thank you.
And I'll just add, like I said, we're running short on time and typically try to get these meetings over with in 1.5 hours. So I do appreciate you all being here today on this, and appreciate the conversations I've had with folks in AOC about this. I believe I can remember, I guess, when COVID started and Zoom court, I thought, this is going to be a disaster. This is not going to work. I thought it was kind of a joke, but I've really learned to realize that it can be a very effective tool, and I think the usage has evolved and people have gotten more comfortable with it, and judges and attorneys and even the parties before the court, the litigants, have learned how to utilize this when appropriate. It's not appropriate for everything, but can be utilized very effectively. And it's not just a convenience factor for attorneys. I think sometimes people try to make it to be that, but it can be very convenient for the parties that are appearing before the court because they don't have to take time off work for when they have important matters, personal matters before the court. Some of the, sometimes the most stressful, important things that may happen in their lifetime, that they want to be there to listen and they don't have to take time off work and those sorts of things. So I think it helps with security. You got less foot traffic, so the less foot traffic you have in that courthouse, the fewer problems you're going to have. You can save money on the design and construction of courthouses and kind of reimagining what the courtroom of the future looks like, and can save a lot of money when it comes to correctional issues and prisoners and the transportation costs. So a lot of potential here to really be sure that taxpayer dollars are well spent and still provide the essential service of the judicial branch of government for the people. So I do appreciate you all being here, and yes, you may, and
I'll be
let Senator
brief.
Webb have the last word.
Well, and it's a recurring word from me as practitioner. I like having the option for Zoom court. I use Zoom court. It makes our life here easier, but I certainly would never sacrifice the human side of human presentation in the access to justice and then the justice system, and how important it can be to evaluate one's demeanor, one's interaction from a defendant standpoint. And I think, all this saving money is great, but I'm never going to compromise that element and that need. So I'm always for opting. There's some, even a bond hearing. I mean, it's important for that judge to sometimes see, hear, and feel that defendant and judge demeanor in person. So as a practitioner, and for the defendants who can't speak for themselves, don't have a lobbyist here, I'm always going to say it's important to leave the opting and let me make that decision or my client make that decision. So I'm going to talk about it every time we talk about saving money, I'm going to be talking about that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And it's not, this doesn't work for every sort of case, but it does work in a lot of proceedings. And I think as it's evolved, we're learning where it can be used and how it can be used. So appreciate those comments and concerns, Senator Webb. Any other comments or questions from the committee members? All right. Thank you all. Thanks for the presentation from AOC. Appreciate it. And if there's no further business, I'm going to move this meeting be adjourned.